The Atlanta Police Gala was everything Sarah Collins had learned to tolerate over her 6 years on the force. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, illuminating polished badges and dress uniforms. The air hummed with polite conversation, clinking champagne glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter from clusters of officers trying to forget, for one evening, the weight of what they carried every day. Sarah stood near the bar, her emerald dress clinging to her athletic frame in a way that made her feel simultaneously elegant and exposed. She'd pulled her chestnut hair into an elegant updo, revealing the graceful line of her neck and the small scar behind her left ear, a reminder of a close call 2 years ago that Max had saved her from. Her green eyes scanned the room with the same vigilance she brought to every operation, never fully off duty, even when the uniform was replaced with silk. Max wasn't here, of course. Service dogs, even decorated K9 heroes, weren't invited to black tie events. She'd left him at home with his favorite chew toy and a promise to bring him something from the buffet. The separation felt wrong. After 6 years as partners, she'd grown so accustomed to his presence that nights like this left her feeling incomplete, like she'd forgotten her weapon or her radio. "Officer Collins, you clean up nice." Sarah turned to find Captain Morrison approaching, his barrel chest straining against his dress uniform. He'd been her commanding officer since she joined the K9 unit, a gruff but fair man who treated his officers and their K9 partners with equal respect. "Thank you, Captain. You're looking sharp yourself." Morrison chuckled, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "My wife picked out the tie, said if I wore another boring blue one, she'd resign as my stylist." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "How's Max doing? Heard about that close call on the West Side operation last week." "He's fine. Barely a scratch. That dog has better instincts than half the detectives in this room." "Better instincts than most," Morrison agreed, then lowered his voice. "Speaking of which, any updates on our special project?" Sarah's posture stiffened slightly. The special project was an internal affairs investigation so sensitive that only 5 people in the entire department knew about it. For 3 months, she and her K9 unit had been discreetly gathering evidence of corruption within the upper ranks. Leaked information, tampered evidence, suspicious financial transactions. The trail pointed towards someone high up, someone with access to confidential files and operations. "Nothing concrete yet," Sarah replied quietly. "But Max and I are following some promising leads. We should have something solid within the week." Morrison nodded, his eyes scanning the room with the same wariness Sarah felt. "Good. Commissioner Hayes wants this wrapped up before the new chief officially takes over. Speaking of which, he's supposed to make an appearance tonight, first public showing." Sarah had heard rumors about the new police chief. Daniel Reeves, transferred from Chicago with an impressive record of cleaning up corrupt precincts and implementing community policing initiatives. Young for the position, only 38, but with commendations that read like an action movie script. She'd seen his official photo, strong jawline, intense dark eyes, the kind of face that belonged on a recruitment poster. What she hadn't been told, what nobody had been told, was that Daniel Reeves was also the primary suspect in their corruption investigation. The evidence was circumstantial but disturbing. Encrypted emails traced to an IP address in Chicago during his tenure there. Financial records showing irregular payments to offshore accounts. Witness testimony from a confidential informant claiming that Reeves had connections to organized crime. Internal Affairs wanted solid proof before moving against someone of his rank, which is why they'd brought in Sarah and her K9 unit, to gather evidence without alerting their target. It made her sick to think about. If Reeves was dirty, he'd soon have access to every operation, every undercover agent, every piece of sensitive intelligence in Atlanta. The damage he could do was incalculable. "I'll keep you posted, Captain," Sarah said. Morrison squeezed her shoulder. "I know you will. You're one of the best, Collins. That dog of yours, too." He glanced toward the entrance. "Now go enjoy the party. That's an order." Sarah smiled thinly as Morrison moved away to greet other officers. "Enjoy the party." "Right." She was about to turn back to the bar when she saw him. Marcus Delgado, her ex-boyfriend, was crossing the ballroom with that infuriating swagger he'd perfected over his 8 years as a detective. Tall, handsome in a polished way, with perfectly styled black hair, and a smile that had once made her heart race, but now just made her want to punch something, preferably his face. Their relationship had ended 6 months ago in spectacular fashion. Marcus had grown increasingly resentful of her bond with Max, making snide comments about how she cared more about her mutt than about him. The final straw came when he tried to pressure her into choosing between her canine partnership and their relationship. She'd chosen Max without hesitation. Marcus had responded by breaking up with her publicly at a department barbecue, loudly announcing that he couldn't compete with a dog for her affection. The humiliation had been crushing, not because she regretted her choice, but because Marcus had deliberately tried to damage her reputation. In the weeks that followed, he'd spread rumors about her being emotionally unavailable and married to her job. Some of it had stuck. She'd noticed the pitying looks, the awkward conversations that died when she approached. And now, here he was, cutting through the crowd directly toward her. That smug smile plastered across his face like he'd already won something. Sarah's heart hammered. She wasn't ready for this. Not here. Not now. Not in front of half the department. She scanned for an escape route, but Marcus was too close, his trajectory too direct. In seconds he'd be in front of her, probably with some cutting remark about her being alone, or some backhanded compliment designed to remind everyone within earshot of their failed relationship. Panic surged through her chest. She needed an out. She needed... A man stood 3 feet away, his back to her, engaged in conversation with someone she didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that suggested either excellent taste or serious money. Dark hair, slightly wavy, touched the collar of his crisp white shirt. Sarah didn't think. She acted. In 2 quick steps, she closed the distance, grabbed the stranger's shoulder to turn him around and kissed him. For a heartbeat, the man stiffened in surprise. Then, inexplicably, he responded. His hand came up to cup the back of her head, his other arm sliding around her waist with confident familiarity. The kiss deepened, and Sarah felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with her desperate gambit and everything to do with the man himself. He tasted like whiskey and something darker, something that made her forget for a moment why she'd grabbed him in the first place. His lips were firm but not demanding, his hold strong but not controlling. There was something about the way he kissed, like he was both surprised and intrigued, like he was trying to figure out the puzzle she'd just handed him while simultaneously solving it in the most direct way possible. When they finally broke apart, Sarah's heart was racing for entirely different reasons than Marcus. The stranger's eyes, deep brown, almost black in the chandelier light, studied her with an intensity that made her skin flush. "Well," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her chest. "That's one hell of a greeting." Sarah's mind scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't make her sound completely insane. "I'm sorry, Sarah, how delightful." She closed her eyes briefly. Too late. Marcus had arrived. When she opened them, Marcus stood 2 feet away, his expression caught between confusion and irritation. His eyes flicked between Sarah and the stranger, trying to piece together what he'd just witnessed. "Marcus," Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain steady. She kept one hand on the stranger's arm, maintaining the illusion. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Clearly," Marcus said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. He extended his hand toward the stranger. "Marcus Delgado, detective. And you are." The stranger's expression remained neutral, almost amused. He shook Marcus's hand with measured courtesy. "Just someone enjoying the evening." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "I don't recognize you. You new to the department?" Something like that. The evasion only seemed to irritate Marcus more. He turned his attention back to Sarah, his smile sharp. "I didn't realize you'd moved on so quickly, Sarah. Good for you. Though I have to say, kissing strangers at department functions seems a bit desperate." The barb hit its mark, and Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. But before she could respond, the stranger spoke. "I don't think there's anything desperate about knowing what you want and going after it," he said calmly. His hand moved to the small of Sarah's back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. "Sarah strikes me as someone who doesn't waste time on games." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And you'd know this after what, 5 minutes?" "Some things you can tell right away," the stranger replied. His tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath, like when someone's outstayed their welcome in a conversation. The tension between the two men was palpable. Sarah found herself caught between mortification at the situation she'd created and grudging admiration for how this stranger was handling Marcus's barely concealed hostility. Marcus's fake smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. "Right. Well, enjoy your evening." He looked at Sarah one more time. "We should catch up sometime, Sarah. Lots to talk about." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd with his dignity intact and his message delivered. This wasn't over. Sarah exhaled slowly, tension draining from her shoulders. Then reality crashed back. She'd just kissed a complete stranger to avoid her ex-boyfriend at a police gala, in front of dozens of colleagues. She turned to face the man she'd accosted, preparing to apologize profusely, but the words died on her lips. Up close, he was even more striking than she'd first registered. Strong features, a slight shadow of stubble along his jaw, and those intense eyes that seemed to see straight through her careful composure. "I am so sorry," Sarah began. "That was completely inappropriate and unprofessional and—" He held up a hand, a slight smile playing at his lips. "No need to apologize, though I am curious about the context." Sarah glanced around, confirming that Marcus was out of earshot. "My ex-boyfriend. He ended our relationship in a very public, very humiliating way 6 months ago. When I saw him heading toward me with that look on his face, I just panicked. So you used me as a human shield?" "Essentially, yes. I'm really sorry." The stranger studied her for a moment, then extended his hand properly. "Well, if we're gonna fake a relationship to ward off your ex, we should at least know each other's names. I'm Daniel." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the calluses that suggested he wasn't just some bureaucrat. "Sarah Collins, K9 unit." Interest sparked in his eyes. "K9? That's impressive. How long have you been with the unit?" 6 years. My partner's name is Max. Belgian Malinois. I've heard Belgian Malinois are incredible working dogs. Intense, loyal, smart as hell. That's Max, exactly. He's... Sarah caught herself before launching into her usual enthusiastic description of her partner. This was still a stranger, and she'd already imposed on him enough. "He's amazing. Best partner I could ask for." Daniel's smile widened slightly. "I get the feeling there's a story about why you chose your dog over your ex-boyfriend." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "How did you... The way you lit up when you mentioned Max versus the way you looked when your ex walked away. Not hard to read between the lines." She found herself smiling despite the awkwardness of the situation. "Marcus wanted me to choose between my K9 partnership and our relationship. He didn't like that I was closer to Max than I was to him." "Then he's an idiot." The blunt assessment surprised a laugh out of Sarah. "That's what my captain said." "Your captain sounds like a wise man." Before Sarah could respond, the lights in the ballroom dimmed slightly and a voice boomed through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." Commissioner Hayes stood at the podium on the raised platform at the far end of the ballroom. He was an imposing figure, even at 63, with silver hair and a bearing that commanded respect. The conversations died down as officers turned their attention to the stage. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Hayes continued. "As you know, this gala is our opportunity to celebrate the dedication, bravery, and sacrifice of Atlanta's finest. But tonight is also special for another reason. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing you to someone who represents the very best of law enforcement, someone with a distinguished record of service, someone who has dedicated his career to protecting and serving with integrity and courage." Sarah felt Daniel shift beside her, his posture straightening almost imperceptibly. "Please join me in welcoming Atlanta's new chief of police, Daniel Reeves." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her breath caught in her throat as the crowd erupted in applause. She turned slowly to look at the man beside her, the man she'd just kissed, the man who'd defended her against Marcus. Daniel's expression was apologetic as he met her stunned gaze. "That would be me," he said quietly. "I was going to mention it, but then your ex showed up and—" Sarah couldn't hear the rest over the roaring in her ears. Daniel Reeves, the new police chief, the man whose encrypted emails and suspicious financial transactions she'd been investigating for 3 months, the man she was supposed to be gathering evidence against. The man she'd just kissed in front of half the department. "I have to go," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, wait!" But she was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. Her mind reeled with implications, each one worse than the last. If anyone connected her to Daniel now, after that kiss, her entire investigation would be compromised. Internal affairs would pull her from the case. Or worse, if Daniel really was dirty, she just tipped him off that someone might be watching him. She burst through the doors into the cool night air of the hotel's garden terrace, gasping as if she'd been underwater. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone, scrolling to Captain Morrison's number. Before she could call, footsteps sounded behind her. She spun around to find Daniel standing in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "I know this looks bad," he said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. "But I promise there's an explanation for why I didn't introduce myself properly." "Don't," Sarah said sharply. "Don't explain. Don't say anything." Daniel frowned. "Sarah, I'm not sure what just happened back there, but you look like you've seen a ghost." "You're the new chief," she said, her voice steadier now, "and She couldn't even finish the sentence. Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes. "You're worried about how it looks. The kiss." "Ah, of course I'm worried about how it looks. You're my superior officer, and She stopped herself before revealing too much. "You improvised," Daniel said calmly, "to avoid an uncomfortable situation with your ex. I played along because I could see you needed help. That's all it was." "That's all it was," Sarah repeated, the words feeling hollow. If only it were that simple. Daniel took a step closer, and Sarah forced herself not to back away. "Look, I know we got off to an unusual start, but I meant what I said in there. You strike me as someone who doesn't waste time on games, so I'll be straight with you. I think you're interesting, and under different circumstances, I'd ask you to dinner. But I also understand the position this puts both of us in, so we can forget the whole thing happened, chalk it up to a bizarre coincidence, and maintain strictly professional boundaries from here on out." It was the perfect solution. The professional, appropriate response, exactly what Sarah needed to hear. So why did it make her chest tighten with disappointment? "That sounds good," she said, hating how formal her voice sounded. "Professional boundaries." "Absolutely." Daniel studied her for a long moment, and Sarah had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her careful composure. Then he nodded once. "Good. I'm glad we cleared that up." He paused at the doorway, glancing back. "For what it's worth, Sarah Collins, your ex-boyfriend, really is an idiot." Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone on the terrace with her racing thoughts and the lingering memory of a kiss that should never have happened. She pulled out her phone again, this time calling the one being she could always count on to listen without judgment. The phone rang twice before the pet sitter answered. "Hey, Sarah! Max is doing great. You want to say hi? Please." There was a rustling sound, then the unmistakable sound of panting breath and a soft whine. Max. "Hey, buddy," Sarah said softly, her throat tight. "I know, I miss you too. I'll be home soon, I promise." Max whined again, as if he could sense her distress even through the phone. That was his gift, that uncanny ability to read her better than any human ever could. "Thanks for watching him," Sarah told the sitter. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. She ended the call and stared out at the Atlanta skyline, glittering with lights that reflected off the glass towers like fallen stars. Somewhere in that sprawl of buildings and streets was the truth about Daniel Reeves. Whether he was a good man, caught in bad circumstances, or a corrupt officer who'd learned to hide behind an impressive record. And Sarah Collins, with her carefully honed instincts and her loyal partner Max, was going to find out which one, even if it meant investigating the man she'd just kissed, even if it meant ignoring the way her heart had raced when his arms wrapped around her, even if it meant acknowledging that, for the first time in 6 months, she'd felt something other than grief and anger over a failed relationship. Sarah Collins had always trusted her instincts. They'd kept her alive through 6 years of dangerous operations. They'd led her to Max when she'd needed a partner she could count on. But right now, standing alone on a hotel terrace with the memory of Daniel Reeves's kiss still burning on her lips, her instincts were telling her two completely contradictory things. Stay away from this man. He's dangerous. And there's more to this story than you know. The question was, which instinct should she trust? Sarah pulled her shoulders back, channeling the confidence that had earned her commendations and the respect of her peers. She'd figure it out. She always did. But first, she needed to get home to Max, because whatever storm was coming, she'd face it the same way she faced everything, with her partner by her side and her faith in justice as her guide. Even if this time, justice came wearing a charcoal suit and a smile that made her forget, just for a moment, all the reasons she should be running in the opposite direction. The morning after the gala, Sarah arrived at the precinct 30 minutes early, Max trotting beside her with his usual alert precision. The K9 unit was housed in a separate wing of the building, away from the main bullpen, which gave her team the privacy they needed for their specialized operations. It also meant she could avoid running into Daniel Reeves on his first official day as chief. At least, that was the plan. Max's tail wagged as they pushed through the double doors into the K9 section. The space smelled like dog food, leather, and the industrial cleaner they used on the training mats. 3 other handlers were already there, preparing their partners for the day shift. "Collins, how was the fancy party?" Officer Jake Chen called out, his German Shepherd Rex sitting obediently at his side. Jake was 26, enthusiastic, and one of the best narcotics detection handlers Sarah had ever worked with. "Eventful," Sarah replied, moving to Max's locker to retrieve his tactical vest and gear. "I heard the new chief showed up. What's he like?" Officer Maria Santos chimed in from across the room. Her bloodhound Luna lay sprawled at her feet, those massive ears twitching. Sarah kept her expression neutral as she fastened Max's vest, checking each strap with practiced efficiency. "Seemed professional. Didn't get to talk to him much." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but it was necessary. Nobody could know about the kiss. Nobody could know that she'd spent the entire night replaying every second of that encounter, analyzing Daniel's reactions, searching for clues about whether he was the corrupt officer they suspected or an innocent man being framed. Max whined softly, pressing his nose against her hand. He always knew when something was bothering her. "It's okay, boy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears, "just thinking too hard. Collins, my office. Now." Captain Morrison's voice cut through the casual morning banter. Sarah's stomach tightened as she met his gaze across the room. His expression was grim. She followed him into his cramped office, Max padding silently beside her. Morrison closed the door and gestured for her to sit. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Internal Affairs called me at 6 this morning. They want to accelerate the investigation into Reeves." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Why? What changed?" Morrison pulled a folder from his desk and slid it across to her. "New intelligence came in overnight. A witness from Chicago, one of Reeves's former colleagues, came forward with information about suspicious activity during his tenure there. Meetings with known organized crime figures, evidence tampering in at least 3 cases, and substantial cash deposits that can't be explained by his salary." Sarah opened the folder, scanning the documents. Her heart sank with each page. The evidence was damning. Surveillance photos of Daniel meeting with a man identified as Vincent Calabresi, a Chicago mobster with connections to drug trafficking and money laundering. Bank statements showing deposits of $20,000 each month for 6 months. Witness testimony describing how Daniel had allegedly altered crime scene reports to protect certain individuals. "This is bad," Sarah said quietly. "It gets worse. IA wants you to get close to him. They think you're the perfect person to gain his trust and gather evidence." Sarah's head snapped up. "Captain, I can't." "I know how it sounds, Collins. But you're the best investigator we have, and your K9 unit gives you a legitimate reason to interact with him. Reeves has already expressed interest in observing K9 operations. He sent an email this morning requesting a briefing on our capabilities." The folder suddenly felt heavy in Sarah's hands. Getting close to Daniel, pretending friendship or interest while secretly investigating him, it felt like a betrayal, even if he was potentially a criminal. "And after last night, after that kiss, what if he's innocent?" Sarah asked. "What if someone's setting him up?" Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Then you'll find evidence of that too. That's what investigations are about, Collins. Finding the truth, whatever it is. Can you do this?" Could she? Could she look Daniel Reeves in the eye, knowing what she knew, suspecting what she suspected, and pretend everything was normal? Max pressed against her leg, his weight solid and reassuring. She'd spent 6 years learning to trust her instincts in the field. Those same instincts had kept her alive through shootouts, raids, and close calls that could have ended her career or her life. "I can do it," she said. "Good. He wants the K9 briefing this afternoon at 1400 hours. Be professional, be thorough, and keep your eyes open." Morrison paused. "And Collins, be careful. If Reeves is dirty, he's smart enough to have stayed hidden this long. Don't underestimate him." Sarah left Morrison's office with the folder tucked under her arm and a weight settling in her chest. Max followed close, his dark eyes watchful. He knew something was wrong. He always knew. The morning passed in a blur of paperwork and training exercises. Sarah ran Max through his detection drills, watching with professional pride as he flawlessly identified 3 hidden drug samples in the training warehouse. His nose was extraordinary, capable of detecting substances through walls, underwater, even in airtight containers. That's why she'd been assigned to this investigation in the first place. If there was physical evidence linking Daniel to corruption, Max could find it. At 1350 hours, Sarah found herself standing outside the chief's office on the 3rd floor, Max sitting alertly beside her. Her dress uniform was crisp, her badge polished, and her hands completely steady despite the nervous energy coiling in her stomach. She knocked twice. "Come in." Daniel's office was larger than Morrison's, but not ostentatiously so. Dark wood furniture, professional certificates on the walls, and a window overlooking the parking lot. Daniel sat behind his desk in full uniform, the silver stars on his collar catching the afternoon light. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, pleasure, maybe a hint of wariness. "Officer Collins," he said, standing. "Thank you for coming." "Chief Reeves." Sarah kept her voice professional, neutral. "You requested a briefing on K9 capabilities." "I did." Daniel's gaze dropped to Max, who was watching him with intense focus. "And this must be Max." "Yes, sir. Belgian Malinois, 6 years old, trained in narcotics detection, tracking and protection." Daniel moved around the desk slowly, giving Max time to assess him. To Sarah's surprise, he crouched down to Max's level, extending his hand palm down for the dog to sniff. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said quietly. "I've heard good things about you." Max's ears swiveled forward, analyzing this new person with his characteristic intensity. He sniffed Daniel's hand thoroughly, then took 2 steps back, positioning himself between Sarah and Daniel. Not aggressive, but clearly protective. Daniel noticed. "He's not sure about me." "He's cautious with new people," Sarah said, which was true but not the whole truth. Max was rarely this reserved. Usually he either trusted someone immediately or showed clear signs of distrust. This guarded middle ground was unusual, Daniel stood, brushing off his knees. Smart dog. Caution keeps you alive. He moved back behind his desk, gesturing for Sarah to sit. I wanted this briefing because I believe K9 units are underutilized in modern policing. In Chicago, I saw firsthand how valuable they can be when properly deployed. You worked with K9 units in Chicago? Sarah asked, keeping her tone curious rather than interrogative. Briefly, we had a smaller unit than what you have here, only 4 teams, focused mainly on narcotics and bomb detection. Daniel pulled up something on his computer. I've been reviewing Atlanta's K9 program. Impressive success rate. Your team alone has a 93% accuracy on narcotics detection. Max is exceptional, Sarah said, pride creeping into her voice, despite her determination to stay detached. He's been instrumental in several major busts over the past 2 years. I read the reports. The warehouse operation in 2023, the airport seizure last year, both directly resulted from his alerts. Daniel's gaze moved from the screen to her face. You've built an impressive partnership. There was something in his tone that made Sarah's defenses rise. Was he genuinely interested in K9 operations, or was he fishing for information about their methods? If he was involved in corruption, knowing how their detection worked could help him avoid getting caught. We train constantly, Sarah said carefully. Max's abilities require regular reinforcement and new challenges to stay sharp. I'd like to see that training in action. Would it be possible to observe one of your sessions? Sarah's mind raced. Having Daniel at their training facility could be an opportunity to observe him more closely, to see how he reacted to their operations. But it also meant letting him into their space, potentially exposing their methods. I'd need to clear it with Captain Morrison, but I don't see why not. We have a session scheduled for tomorrow morning at 0700. Early, Daniel noted with a slight smile. I like it. Shows dedication. Max doesn't believe in sleeping in. The comment earned her a genuine laugh from Daniel, and Sarah felt that treacherous flutter in her chest again. Stop it, she told herself firmly. This is a suspect in a corruption investigation, not a date. Before you go, Daniel said, his expression growing more serious, I want to address what happened last night. At the gala, Sarah's back stiffened. Chief, we agreed to maintain professional boundaries. I know, and we will. But I also don't want there to be any awkwardness between us. What happened was unusual, but it doesn't need to define our working relationship. He paused. Unless you'd prefer to request a transfer to avoid reporting directly to me? No, Sarah said quickly, perhaps too quickly. A transfer would end her investigation and leave someone else to determine Daniel's guilt or innocence. No transfer necessary. We're both professionals. We can handle this. Good. Daniel's relief seemed genuine, because honestly, Sarah, Officer Collins, I'm going to need experienced people like you if I'm going to do this job right. Atlanta isn't Chicago, and I'm still learning the landscape. Having solid officers who know the city, who've built relationships with the community, that's invaluable. It was a good speech, humble, practical, designed to build loyalty. Sarah wondered if it was sincere or calculated. I'm happy to help however I can, Chief. I appreciate that. Daniel glanced at his watch. I'm taking up your time. Thank you for the briefing. I'll see you tomorrow morning at the training facility. Sarah stood, Max rising immediately to join her. As they turned to leave, Daniel spoke again. Officer Collins. She looked back. Your ex-boyfriend, Detective Delgado. He's in major crimes, correct? Sarah's instincts went on high alert. Yes, sir. I'm reviewing personnel files, familiarizing myself with the department structure. I noticed he's been with major crimes for 6 years, but his promotion to detective first grade has been delayed twice. Do you know why? The question felt loaded, like a trap waiting to spring. Was Daniel testing her loyalty, trying to gather information about Marcus for some reason? I'm not privy to major crimes personnel decisions, Chief. Of course. Daniel's expression was unreadable. Just curious. He seemed territorial last night. I wanted to make sure there wouldn't be any complications. There won't be, Sarah said firmly. Marcus and I are over. Whatever issues he has are his problem, not mine. Good to know. Daniel's smile returned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Have a good afternoon, Officer Collins. Sarah left the office with her mind spinning. That last exchange about Marcus felt significant, but she couldn't figure out why. Was Daniel concerned about workplace drama, or was there something else going on? Max pressed close to her leg as they walked down the hallway, his body language still tense. Dogs couldn't lie about their feelings, and Max's caution around Daniel was a data point Sarah couldn't ignore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Morrison. How did it go? She typed back, "Training observation tomorrow 0700. We'll report after." The rest of the day passed in routine tasks, but Sarah's mind kept returning to the folder Morrison had given her. That night, after her shift ended, she took Max home to her small house in Grant Park and spread the documents across her kitchen table. Max settled on his bed in the corner, watching her with those intelligent, dark eyes. Sarah had adopted this house specifically because it had a large, fenced yard for Max and was close enough to the precinct for quick emergency calls. "What do you think, Max?" she asked, studying a surveillance photo of Daniel meeting with Vincent Calabrese outside a Chicago restaurant. "Guilty or innocent?" Max tilted his head, ears perked forward, in that way that always made Sarah smile despite herself. The evidence was compelling. The photos clearly showed Daniel with a known criminal. The bank deposits were substantial and unexplained. The witness testimony was detailed and specific. But something nagged at Sarah's investigator instincts. The evidence was almost too perfect, too neatly packaged. Real corruption was usually messier, harder to prove. This felt staged, like someone wanted Daniel to look guilty. Or maybe she was just desperate to believe he wasn't dirty because of one incredible kiss. Sarah pushed that thought away angrily. She was better than this. She didn't let personal feelings compromise investigations. Her phone rang, displaying Morrison's number. "Collins, we have a situation. Narcotics picked up chatter about a major shipment coming through the port of Savannah tomorrow night. They want K-9 support for the interdiction operation. You and Max available?" "Yes, sir." "What's the timeline?" "Team meets at 1800 hours tomorrow for briefing. Operation goes down at 2200. Could be an all-nighter." "We'll be there." After Morrison hung up, Sarah sat back in her chair, processing this new development. A major narcotics operation would require coordination with multiple units, which meant multiple opportunities for information to leak. If Daniel was involved in corruption, if he was protecting drug shipments, this would be the perfect test. She pulled out her laptop and began drafting a detailed operational plan for Max's deployment. But as she worked, a darker thought crept in. What if Daniel wasn't the corrupt one? What if the real criminal was someone else? Someone who wanted to frame the new chief before he could start cleaning house? Someone like Marcus, who had access to major crimes files and a personal grudge against both her and, apparently, Daniel. Sarah shook her head. She was speculating without evidence, seeing connections that might not exist. That's how investigations went wrong, when you started with a conclusion and worked backward. No, she needed to follow the evidence wherever it led. Tomorrow's training observation would give her a chance to study Daniel more closely, and tomorrow night's operation would reveal whether information was leaking from the top. Max whined softly, sensing her tension. Sarah closed her laptop and moved to sit on the floor beside his bed, running her hands through his thick fur. "We'll figure this out, buddy," she whispered. "We always do." Max licked her face, his tail thumping gently. In his simple, loyal world, things were clear. Sarah was his partner, his pack, his purpose. He didn't care about corruption investigations or complicated feelings. He cared about doing his job and protecting her. If only human relationships were that straightforward. That night, Sarah dreamed of the gala. But in the dream, when she turned to face the man she'd kissed, his face kept shifting. Daniel, Marcus, strangers she didn't recognize. And Max was barking frantically, trying to warn her of danger she couldn't see. She woke at 5:30, heart pounding, Max's cold nose pressed against her hand. He'd learned to wake her from nightmares, a skill he'd developed on his own during her first year with PTSD after a particularly bad shooting. "I'm okay," she told him, scratching his ears. "Just a weird dream." But as she got up and started her morning routine, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the dream was trying to tell her something important. Something about trust, about masks, about how easy it was to be fooled by what you wanted to see instead of what was really there. By 06:45, Sarah and Max were at the K9 training facility, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of the city with obstacle courses, scent detection setups, and attack simulation areas. She ran Max through his warm-up exercises, watching his powerful body move with practiced grace as he cleared jumps and navigated the obstacle course. At 06:58, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Daniel stepped out in tactical casual wear, dark cargo pants, a fitted department polo, and boots built for action rather than ceremony. He looked younger like this, more approachable, and Sarah had to consciously redirect her thoughts. Professional, detached, investigation subject. "Good morning, Officer Collins," Daniel called, approaching with an easy confidence. "Thanks for letting me observe." "Chief," Sarah kept her tone neutral, "we're about to run a full detection scenario. Max will be searching for hidden narcotics in a simulated warehouse environment." "Sounds interesting." Daniel's gaze moved to Max, who was watching him with the same cautious intensity as yesterday. "Does he ever warm up to people? Or is he always this suspicious?" "He warms up when he decides you're trustworthy." "Fair enough." Daniel smiled slightly. "Can't blame him for good judgment." Sarah led him to the observation area, overlooking the main training floor. Jake and Maria were already there with Rex and Luna, preparing for their own drills. "Chief Reeves is observing today," Sarah announced to her teammates. Both officers straightened, clearly nervous about having the new chief watching their work. "Relax," Daniel said easily. "I'm here to learn, not to judge. I want to see how you actually operate, not some polished performance." His words seemed to ease some of the tension. Sarah appreciated that. He understood how to work with people, how to make them comfortable. Another point in his favor, or another sign of how skilled he was at manipulation. "Stop over-analyzing everything," Sarah told herself. She took Max to the starting position at the warehouse entrance. The space had been set up to simulate a real operation. Stacked pallets, shipping containers, office areas, multiple floors. Somewhere in this maze were 3 small packets of training narcotics, inert substances that smelled like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine. "Max, search!" Sarah commanded. Max's entire demeanor changed. His nose went up, analyzing the air currents, and then he was moving with focused purpose. Sarah followed at a distance, letting him work, watching as he systematically cleared each section. His training was beautiful to watch, nothing wasted, every movement deliberate. 15 minutes in, Max froze near a shipping container. His body went rigid, and he performed his alert signal, sitting perfectly still, staring at the target location. "Good boy, Max. Show me." Max moved to the container and pawed once at a seam where 2 panels met. Sarah pulled out her inspection tools and carefully pried open the seam. Inside, wedged in the hollow space, was a packet marked "Training Cocaine." From the observation deck she could hear Daniel asking questions and Jake providing answers about Max's training methodology. She made a mental note to brief Jake later about keeping operational details vague. If Daniel was dirty, too much information could compromise their effectiveness. Max found the other 2 packets within 20 minutes. His accuracy was perfect, his confidence absolute. When the drill ended, Sarah rewarded him with his favorite toy and 5 minutes of enthusiastic play. Daniel descended from the observation deck as Sarah was putting away her equipment. "That was impressive," he said, and he sounded genuinely awed. "I've seen good K9 work, but Max is exceptional. How long did it take to train him to that level?" 2 years of intensive training plus constant reinforcement. Max has natural talent, but his skills are the result of thousands of hours of work. Your work? You're his primary trainer, right? "I am." Daniel crouched down again, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. Max watched him warily, but didn't back away this time. "You know what's fascinating?" Daniel said quietly, still watching Max. "Dogs don't lie. They can't hide what they feel. If Max doesn't trust me, there's a reason for that." Sarah's pulse quickened. Was this a confession? An acknowledgement that Max sensed something wrong about him? "Maybe he just needs more time," she said carefully. "Maybe." Daniel stood, his expression thoughtful. "Or maybe he knows something I don't. Dogs have instincts we've forgotten how to access." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from Morrison. "Briefing moved up to 1400 hours. Intelligence indicates shipment timeline accelerated. Need you and Max there." Sarah looked up to find Daniel watching her. "Problem?" he asked. She made a split-second decision. If information was leaking from the top, this would reveal it. "Narcotics operation tonight. Major shipment interdiction. Max and I are supporting." Daniel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Big operation?" "Could be. We'll know more at the briefing." "Good luck," Daniel said. Then, more quietly, "Be careful out there, Sarah." The use of her first name felt intimate, dangerous. Sarah nodded once and turned away, Max at her heels. As they walked to her vehicle, Max suddenly stopped and looked back at Daniel, who was still watching them from across the parking lot. The dog's ears were forward, his tail still, his entire body radiating uncertainty. "What is it, Max?" Sarah murmured. "What do you sense?" But Max couldn't answer, and Sarah was left with more questions than ever. Was Daniel Reeves a corrupt officer who'd fooled everyone with his impressive record? Or was he an innocent man being destroyed by forces he didn't even know were working against him? And most dangerous of all, was Sarah Collins falling for the suspect she was supposed to be? Investigating. That afternoon, as the tactical team gathered for the operation briefing, Sarah sat in the back with Max and watched carefully for any signs of information leakage. The operation details were specific. A shipping container at the port of Savannah, scheduled to arrive at 2200 hours, believed to contain 50 kilograms of cocaine. It was the kind of bus that could make careers or destroy them if it went wrong. And as Sarah listened to the briefing, studying the faces around the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone in this room, maybe someone she knew and trusted, was already planning how to make sure this operation failed. The only question was, who? The port of Savannah sprawled before them like a mechanical forest, shipping containers stacked 5 high, massive cranes looming against the night sky, and the constant hum of refrigeration units creating a white noise backdrop to their operation. Sarah crouched behind a container marked Maersk. Max pressed against her leg, both of them invisible in the shadows. The tactical team had deployed an hour ago, setting up surveillance positions around container 4782B, the target. Intelligence indicated the shipment would arrive by 2200 hours, offloaded from a cargo ship that had originated in Colombia with stops in Panama and Miami. 50 kilograms of cocaine. Street value, approximately $2 million. Sarah's radio crackled softly. "K9 unit, this is Overwatch. Container is being moved to your position. Stand by for confirmation." "Copy that," Sarah whispered into her mic. She felt Max tense beside her, reading her body language. He knew they were hunting. Through her night vision goggles, Sarah watched as a forklift approached, carrying the distinctive red container marked with the identification number they'd been given. The driver, a port worker named Felix Morales, who was supposedly clean, positioned the container in the designated inspection zone and drove away without a backward glance. "All units, target is in position," came Lieutenant Davies's voice over the radio. Davies was running the operation from the mobile command center half a mile away. "K9 unit, you're cleared to approach." Sarah moved forward with Max, their movements synchronized after 6 years of partnership. The container sat innocuously among hundreds of others, but Max's nose would tell them if intelligence was correct. "Max, search." Max's nose went up, sampling the air. He circled the container once, twice, and then his body language changed. Ears forward, tail straight, every muscle focused. He moved to the container's door and performed his alert signal, sitting perfectly still, staring at the target. Positive hit. Overwatch, this is K9 unit. Max has alerted. Confirmed positive for narcotics. Copy that. Tactical team, move in. Let's get this container opened and secured. What happened next should have been routine. The tactical team approached, bolt cutters ready to open the sealed container. Sarah pulled Max back to a safe distance. Standard procedure in case of booby traps or armed suspects inside. But as the first officer reached for the container lock, Sarah's instincts screamed warning. It was too easy. Too clean. The intelligence had been too specific, the container's location too convenient. In her experience, major drug operations didn't hand themselves over on a silver platter. "Wait," she said into her radio. "Something's wrong." The explosion tore through the night, not from the target container, but from the one directly behind it. The blast wave knocked Sarah off her feet, her ears ringing, her vision whiting out. She felt Max's weight on top of her. He'd thrown himself over her body, protecting her from debris. Chaos erupted, shouts over the radio, officers calling for medical support, the wail of alarms throughout the port. Sarah struggled to her feet, checking Max frantically for injuries. He seemed okay, shaken but unharmed. "All units, report status." Davis's voice cut through the confusion. Sarah's hands shook as she keyed her radio. K9 unit is code 4. Minor injuries, both operational. Around her, other teams reported in. Miraculously, no one had been seriously hurt. The explosion had been positioned to cause chaos rather than casualties. But the message was clear. Someone had known they were coming. Someone had leaked the operation. Overwatch. The target container is empty, one of the tactical officers reported. It's been cleaned. No residue, no drugs. Nothing. Sarah felt cold dread settle in her stomach. This had been a setup. Either intelligence had been wrong, or someone had warned the drug traffickers that law enforcement was coming. They'd moved the drugs, planted a secondary device to create confusion, and made the entire department look foolish. "All units, secure the scene and fall back to staging area," Davies ordered. "This operation is compromised." The ride back to the precinct was silent. Max sat in his compartment in Sarah's K9 vehicle, and through the partition she could see him watching her with concern. He knew something bad had happened. At 0300 hours, Sarah found herself in a conference room with Morrison, Davies, and 3 internal affairs officers she didn't recognize. The lead IA investigator was a woman named Detective Karen Walsh. Hard eyes, severe expression, the kind of cop who trusted no one. "Let's be clear about what happened tonight," Walsh said, spreading crime scene photos across the table. "This operation was compromised. Someone with access to operational intelligence warned the targets. We need to know who." "The information was compartmentalized," Morrison said firmly. "Only essential personnel knew the details." "Then one of your essential personnel is dirty." Walsh turned her gaze on Sarah. "Officer Collins, you briefed Chief Reeves on this operation yesterday morning. What exactly did you tell him?" Sarah's throat went dry. "I mentioned there was a major narcotics operation scheduled. I didn't provide specific details about location or timing." "But you confirmed it was happening?" "Yes," Walsh made a note. "And how did he react to this information?" Sarah thought back to that moment in the training facility parking lot. Daniel's expression had been carefully neutral, but there'd been something in his eyes, concern, calculation. "He wished me luck and told me to be careful." "Interesting." Walsh pulled out a document. "Because at 1300 hours yesterday, 1 hour before the operation briefing, a call was made from a burner phone to a number we've linked to the Calabrese organization. The call lasted 90 seconds. The cell tower ping puts that phone within half a mile of the police training facility. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Daniel had been at the training facility. He'd learned about the operation from Sarah. 1 hour later, someone had warned the traffickers. That's circumstantial, Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. It's a pattern, Walsh countered, and it matches the intelligence we received from Chicago. Chief Reeves has connections to organized crime. He's had opportunities to leak information. And now an operation he knew about has been compromised. She looked directly at Sarah. Officer Collins, I need you to increase your surveillance of Reeves. Get closer to him. Find out what he's hiding. Sarah felt sick. You want me to spy on my commanding officer based on circumstantial evidence? I want you to do your job, Walsh said coldly. Unless you have a problem with that? Detective Walsh. Morrison's voice carried a warning edge. Officer Collins has been nothing but professional throughout this investigation. Don't question her integrity. I'm questioning everyone's integrity, Captain. That's my job. Walsh gathered her documents. Collins, you have 48 hours to produce something concrete on Reeves. If you can't, we're moving forward with a formal investigation that will likely end his career, guilty or innocent. After Walsh left, Sarah sat in exhausted silence with Morrison. Captain, what if he's not dirty? Sarah asked quietly. What if someone's framing him? Then who? Morrison challenged. And why? I don't know, but the evidence is too perfect. It's like someone wants us to think Reeves is guilty. Morrison rubbed his face wearily. Collins, I know you're a good investigator. I know you trust your instincts, but don't let personal feelings cloud your judgment. Personal feelings? Sarah's voice sharpened. What are you implying? I'm saying that Daniel Reeves is a charismatic man, and you're a professional woman who's been through a difficult breakup. It would be natural to— Stop right there, Captain. Sarah stood, her body rigid with anger. My judgment isn't compromised, but I also won't participate in a witch hunt based on coincidence and circumstantial evidence. If Reeves is dirty, I'll find proof, but I'm not going to manufacture it to satisfy Walsh's timeline. Morrison sighed. Just be careful, Collins. This situation is more dangerous than you realize. Sarah left with Max, stepping out into the pre-dawn darkness. Her body ached from the explosion, her mind spun with doubts, and she desperately needed to think clearly. She drove to Piedmont Park, one of Max's favorite places for off-duty walks. At 4 a.m, the park was deserted, lit by old-fashioned lampposts that created pools of golden light in the darkness. She let Max off his lead, and he bounded ahead, just happy to be outside, free from the tension that had filled the past few hours. Sarah sat on a bench, watching Max explore, and tried to piece together what she knew versus what she suspected. Facts. Daniel Reeves had connections to Vincent Calabrese in Chicago. He'd received unexplained money deposits. A witness testified he'd tampered with evidence. He'd known about tonight's operation. The operation had been compromised. But also facts. Daniel had seemed genuinely interested in K9 operations. He'd been respectful and professional. He'd defended her against Marcus. Max's instincts about him were uncertain, not clearly negative, and most importantly, the evidence against him felt staged. Couldn't sleep either. Sarah jerked around to find Daniel approaching from the parking lot, wearing running clothes and looking as exhausted as she felt. Her hand instinctively moved toward her service weapon before she recognized him. "Chief," she said, trying to keep surprise out of her voice. "What are you doing here?" "Running. I do this route every morning around 4:30. Helps me think." He gestured to the bench. "Mind if I sit?" Every instinct screamed at Sarah to say no, to maintain distance, to remember he was a suspect. But another part of her, the part that wanted answers, saw this as an opportunity. "It's a public park," she said neutrally. Daniel sat, leaving a respectful distance between them. Max noticed him and trotted over, still cautious but less overtly distrustful than before. "I heard about what happened tonight," Daniel said quietly. "The explosion at the port. Are you okay?" "We're fine. Max protected me." "Good dog." Daniel watched Max for a moment. "I also heard the operation was compromised. Someone leaked the information." Sarah's muscles tensed. Was he fishing for information, or did he genuinely not know he was the prime suspect? That's what they're saying. "Sarah, Officer Collins, I need you to know something." Daniel turned to face her directly. I didn't leak that operation. I would never compromise an officer's safety or undermine law enforcement efforts, but I'm also not naive. I know how this looks. How what looks? I know Internal Affairs is investigating me. I've known since before I took this position. Daniel's expression was grim. When Commissioner Hayes offered me this job, he told me there were allegations about my time in Chicago. He gave me the choice: decline the position or accept it, knowing I'd be under a microscope from day one. Sarah's mind raced. Why would you accept under those conditions? Because I'm innocent and I'm tired of running from false accusations. Daniel's voice carried a bitter edge. In Chicago, I made enemies. Powerful enemies. I shut down corrupt operations, arrested connected criminals, and refused to play political games. So they came after me. They manufactured evidence, bribed witnesses, and tried to destroy my career. The Calabrese connection, Sarah said carefully, the meetings, the money, were part of an undercover operation that went wrong. I was working with the FBI to build a case against Vincent Calabrese. The meetings you see in those photos, those were monitored by federal agents. The money deposits, payments from the FBI for my cooperation, the witness testimony about evidence tampering came from a criminal informant who later recanted and admitted he'd been paid to lie. Sarah wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But she'd been fooled before by people who seemed genuine. If that's true, why isn't it in the official record? Because the FBI operation is still classified. The agents I worked with can't publicly confirm my involvement without compromising ongoing investigation. Daniel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I have documentation, sealed affidavits, everything I need to prove my innocence. But Internal Affairs won't accept it because it's classified federal material. So I'm stuck in this limbo, trying to do my job while everyone assumes I'm dirty. Max moved closer to Daniel, sniffing his hand. This time, he didn't pull away or position himself protectively. He simply sniffed, considered, and then, surprisingly, sat down next to Daniel, not quite trusting, but not rejecting either. Max seems to be warming up to you, Sarah observed. Maybe he knows something you don't, Daniel said with a slight smile. Then, more seriously, Sarah, I'm telling you this because I think you're smart enough to see through the setup. Someone is trying to frame me, and they're using real elements from my past, my FBI work, my connection to the Calabrese case, to make it look legitimate. Who would do that? I don't know yet, but I have suspicions. Daniel hesitated. Your ex-boyfriend, Marcus Delgado. What do you know about his connections in major crimes? Sarah's defenses flared. Marcus is arrogant and petty, but he's not dirty. Are you sure? Because I've been reviewing case files since I arrived, and I've noticed something interesting. Every major drug bust that's failed in the past 2 years, every compromised operation, every lost evidence chain, Marcus Delgado was somehow involved in the investigation. That's because he's a good detective who gets assigned to high-profile cases, or because he's strategically positioned to sabotage them. Daniel pulled out his phone, showing Sarah a spreadsheet. I mapped it out. 12 operations in 24 months. Marcus had access to intelligence on 11 of them. 10 failed. The only one that succeeded was when he was on medical leave for a knee injury. Sarah stared at the data, her mind resisting what it implied. Marcus was vindictive and egotistical, but corrupt, working with drug traffickers. Why are you investigating Marcus? She asked. Because someone is leaking information, and he fits the profile better than I do. He has access, opportunity, and, after what I saw at the gala, a personal grudge that might make him sloppy. A grudge against whom? Daniel met her eyes. You, and by extension, anyone you seem to trust or respect, like me. The implication was staggering. Marcus using his position to destroy operations, frame Daniel, and hurt Sarah all at once? That's a serious accusation with no evidence, Sarah said. I know. That's why I'm telling you instead of taking it to Internal Affairs. I need proof, and I need someone I can trust to help me find it. Daniel paused. I know I'm asking a lot. You barely know me. You have every reason to believe I'm the guilty party. But Sarah, I didn't kiss you at that gala because I had some ulterior motive. I kissed you back because for the first time in months something felt right instead of calculated." Sarah's heart hammered. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust her instincts, which were screaming that Daniel was telling the truth, but she'd trusted before and been wrong. "I need time to think," she said finally. "I understand." Daniel stood. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said before. You're one of the best officers in this department. Whatever you decide about me, don't let this situation make you doubt yourself." He started to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. The explosion tonight, it wasn't meant to kill anyone. It was meant to destroy evidence. Whoever set it up wanted to make sure we couldn't trace where the drugs actually went. That suggests someone with tactical knowledge and access to explosives." "Like a cop," Sarah said quietly. "Like a cop who's been compromised by people who can provide money, protection, and a way to hurt the person who rejected him." After Daniel left, Sarah sat on the bench with Max pressed against her legs, watching the sky lighten with approaching dawn. She needed answers. Real answers, not speculation and circumstantial evidence. At 0800 hours, Sarah walked into Captain Morrison's office with Max and a request that she knew would either prove Daniel's innocence or condemn him completely. "Captain, I need access to every case file Marcus Delgado has worked for the past 2 years, and I need it without him knowing I'm looking." Morrison's eyes widened. "Collins, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that maybe we've been investigating the wrong person, and if I'm right, we're about to uncover corruption that goes deeper than one dirty chief." Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll get you the files. But Collins, if you're wrong about this, if you're protecting Reeves because of personal feelings, then I'll turn in my badge myself," Sarah finished. "But Captain, what if I'm right? What if Marcus has been dirty this whole time, and we've been so focused on Daniel that we missed it? Then we have a much bigger problem than we thought," Morrison said grimly, "and a decorated detective who's about to fall very, very far." By noon, Sarah was buried in case files, Max sleeping at her feet while she traced patterns that made her blood run cold. Marcus had indeed been involved in every major failed operation. More damning, his financial records, which Morrison had quietly obtained from a friendly contact in financial crimes, showed regular deposits from an offshore account linked to shell corporations, the same shell corporations that appeared in the evidence against Daniel. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. Someone had used Daniel's FBI work against him, taking real connections to the Calabrese case and twisting them to make him look dirty, and that someone had access to major crimes files, knowledge of Daniel's past, and a personal motivation to destroy both Daniel and Sarah. Her phone rang. It was Jake from the K9 unit. "Collins, you need to get to the evidence locker. Now. Something's wrong with the samples from last night's port operation." Sarah's stomach dropped. She grabbed Max and ran. The evidence locker was in chaos when she arrived. The supervising officer looked panicked. "It's gone," he said. "The trace evidence Max indicated on, the samples we collected from the target container. Someone signed them out this morning with proper authorization. But when we tried to verify, the authorization was fake." "Who signed them out?" Sarah demanded. The officer checked his log. "Detective Marcus Delgado, Major Crimes Division." Sarah felt everything crystallize with terrible clarity. Marcus had leaked tonight's operation. Marcus had arranged the explosion to destroy evidence. And now Marcus had stolen the samples that might have revealed his involvement. But more importantly, Marcus was smart enough to know that she'd figure this out eventually, which meant she and Max were in danger. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at Warehouse District 1400 hours. Come alone. I have proof about Reeves. M. Marcus." Setting a trap. Sarah showed the message to Morrison, who immediately called for tactical backup. But Sarah knew how this would play. Marcus was counting on her bringing support. He'd use that to claim he was the victim, that Sarah and Daniel had conspired against him. "I'm going. Sarah said, "but I'm not going alone. I'm taking Max." "Collins, this is too dangerous." "Captain, Max has saved my life more times than I can count. If anyone can protect me from Marcus, it's him." What Sarah didn't say was that she also had a plan, a risky, potentially career-ending plan. But if it worked, they'd have everything they needed to prove Daniel's innocence and expose Marcus's corruption. She just had to survive long enough to make it happen. At 13:55, Sarah stood outside the abandoned warehouse with Max at her side. The warehouse district was a maze of empty industrial buildings slated for demolition, the perfect place for a confrontation with no witnesses. Her radio was set to emergency frequency. Tactical backup was staged 2 blocks away, ready to move on her signal, and in her pocket, her phone was recording everything that was about to happen. "Ready, Max?" she whispered. Max's dark eyes met hers, absolutely trusting, absolutely ready. Together, they walked into the warehouse to face whatever truth was waiting inside. And Sarah Collins, K-9 officer and investigator, prepared to risk everything on one simple belief, that sometimes the most dangerous criminals are the ones who know exactly how to look like heroes. The warehouse door closed behind them with a hollow boom, and in the darkness Sarah heard Marcus's voice. "I was hoping you'd be stupid enough to come alone." But Sarah smiled grimly, her hand on Max's collar. Because Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated what a well-trained K-9 and a determined officer could do when their backs were against the wall. "Max," Sarah said quietly, "guard." And in that moment, everything Marcus had planned began to fall apart. The warehouse interior was a cathedral of industrial decay. Rusted machinery cast skeletal shadows across the concrete floor, and weak afternoon light filtered through broken windows high above, creating dusty shafts of illumination that only made the darkness between them more absolute. Sarah's eyes adjusted slowly, her hand resting on Max's tactical vest, feeling his muscles coiled and ready beneath her palm. "Marcus!" Sarah called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I'm here. Alone, like you asked." A laugh echoed from somewhere in the shadows. "Alone? Really, Sarah? You've got your attack dog with you. That's not exactly alone." "Max is my partner. He goes where I go." "Your partner." Marcus emerged from behind a stack of pallets 30 feet away, his service weapon visible in his shoulder holster, but his hands empty and raised in a gesture of false peace. He looked different than he had at the gala. Harder, more dangerous, with none of the polished charm he usually wore like armor. "You always did choose him over actual human beings." Max's body language shifted instantly, his ears flattened against his skull, his lips pulled back slightly to reveal teeth, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. A warning Sarah had learned to trust absolutely. "Easy, Max," Sarah murmured, her hand tightening on his vest, to Marcus. "You said you had proof about Daniel Reeves. I'm here to see it. Right to business. That's what I always appreciated about you, Sarah. No games, no pretense." Marcus took a step closer and Max's growl intensified. "Tell your dog to stand down. I'm not going to hurt you." "Max's instincts are better than mine. If he doesn't trust you, there's a reason." Marcus's expression hardened. "There's a reason, all right. You trained him to hate me. All those months we were together, you never let him warm up to me. You poisoned him against me just like you poison everything." Sarah's jaw tightened. This wasn't about relationship drama or hurt feelings. This was about corruption, betrayal, and attempted murder. She needed to stay focused. "The proof, Marcus. Show me what you have on Reeves." "You really think he's innocent, don't you?" Marcus circled slowly, maintaining distance, but clearly trying to position himself strategically. "Daniel Reeves, the golden boy from Chicago, with the perfect record and the concerned expression. Did he tell you about his FBI operation, his classified documents, his convenient explanation for everything?" "He told me the truth. He told you a story." Marcus's voice dripped with contempt. "And you believed it because you wanted to believe it. Because he kissed you at the gala and made you feel special. Because he paid attention to you in a way I never did." The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth in it. Sarah had wanted to believe Daniel, but that didn't mean he was lying. "If you brought me here just to psychoanalyze my decisions, I'm leaving." "No, you're not." Marcus's hand moved toward his weapon, not drawing it, but making the threat clear. "Because if you leave now, you'll never know the truth about what's really happening in this department, about who's really dirty." Max's growl became a bark. Sharp, urgent, warning. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She read Max's body language like a book. Extreme threat, immediate danger, prepare for attack. "Max says you're lying," Sarah said calmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "He says you're the threat here, not Daniel." Marcus's facade cracked. Rage flashed across his face, raw and ugly. "That goddamn dog! You trust an animal over me? Over a decorated detective with 8 years of service?" "I trust my partner. He's never lied to me." "Can you say the same?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Marcus's hand was now on his weapon's grip, not drawing, but ready. "You want the truth, Sarah? Fine. Here's the truth. Daniel Reeves is exactly what Internal Affairs thinks he is, a corrupt cop with mob connections. And I have proof. Real proof, not some dog's instinct or your romantic fantasies." "Then show me." "It's on my phone. I'm going to reach into my pocket slowly and pull it out. Tell your mutt not to attack." "Max won't attack unless I command it or you threaten me, so don't threaten me." Marcus's smile was cold. "I would never threaten you, Sarah. I loved you. I still—" He stopped himself, his jaw working with suppressed emotion. "I still care about you, despite everything." He pulled out his phone with exaggerated slowness, keeping his other hand visible. Sarah's instinct screamed that something was wrong, but she couldn't identify what. Max's body language had shifted from aggressive warning to something else. Uncertainty, confusion, like he was receiving mixed signals. Marcus tapped his phone screen. "These are bank records. Reeves's personal accounts. Not the FBI money he told you about. Deposits from Vincent Calabresi's shell corporations, dated from last month, after Reeves arrived in Atlanta." He held up the phone so Sarah could see the screen. The documents looked legitimate. Official bank letterhead, account numbers, transaction records showing substantial deposits. But something was off. Sarah had seen enough financial documents in her investigations to recognize subtle inconsistencies. These were almost too perfect, too neatly aligned with the narrative Marcus was selling. "Those could be fabricated," Sarah said. "They're not. I had a forensic accountant verify them." "Which accountant?" Marcus hesitated just for a fraction of a second. "That's confidential, part of the ongoing investigation." And there it was, the lie. Sarah saw it in the micro-expression that flashed across his face, heard it in the slight elevation of his voice pitch. Marcus had always been a terrible liar under pressure. It's why he'd never made detective first grade, despite his years of service. "You're setting him up," Sarah said quietly. "All of this, the Chicago evidence, the leaked operations, the stolen evidence samples from last night. It was you." Marcus's expression went flat. "That's a serious accusation, Officer Collins. You leaked the port operation. You arranged the explosion. You stole the evidence samples this morning." Sarah's voice grew stronger as certainty crystallized. "And now you're trying to frame Daniel Reeves for your crimes. You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can." Sarah pulled out her phone, showing Marcus the recording app that had been running since she entered the warehouse. "This entire conversation is being recorded and transmitted in real time to Captain Morrison and Internal Affairs." For a moment, Marcus simply stared at the phone. Then his face transformed, shock melting into fury, melting into something far more dangerous, the cold calculation of a cornered predator. "You bitch," he breathed. "You actually wore a wire to meet me?" "Not a wire. Just good police work. The kind you used to do before you decided selling out to drug traffickers was more profitable." Marcus's hand moved toward his weapon, but Sarah was faster. Her service weapon cleared her holster in one smooth motion, trained directly at Marcus's center mass. "Don't," she warned. "Hands away from your weapon, now." Max exploded into motion, positioning himself between Sarah and Marcus, his bark echoing like gunshots through the warehouse. Every inch of him radiated lethal intent. This wasn't the playful dog who loved fetch or the disciplined canine who performed searches. This was a Belgian Malinois doing what he'd been bred and trained to do, protect his partner at all costs. "You won't shoot me," Marcus said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "You don't have it in you. Try me. Hands up. Now." Marcus slowly raised his hands, but his expression remained calculating. "Even if you have this recording, it proves nothing. I can claim I was investigating you and Reeves, that I suspected you were working together. Your relationship with him is already suspicious. Kissing him at the gala, spending private time together, defending him against legitimate evidence. The evidence isn't legitimate. You fabricated it using information from Daniel's FBI operation. Prove it. The FBI won't declassify their files to save one corrupt chief. You've got nothing but theories and a recording of an investigative meeting that you secretly recorded, which, by the way, might be inadmissible depending on Georgia wiretapping laws. Sarah's confidence wavered. Marcus was right about the legal complications, but she kept her weapon steady. "There's also the financial evidence," she said. "Your offshore accounts. The deposits from the same shell corporations you used to frame Daniel." Marcus's eyes widened fractionally, surprise and anger. "You've been investigating me? On whose authority?" "On the authority of a police officer who noticed patterns in failed operations and decided to follow the evidence wherever it led. Captain Morrison authorized this. Morrison provided the files. I did the analysis. And Marcus, the evidence is damning. 12 failed operations in 2 years, all of which you had access to, financial deposits that coincide with those failures, stolen evidence that you signed out this morning. You're finished." For several seconds, Marcus said nothing. Then, slowly, he lowered his hands. "Sarah, listen to me. You're making a huge mistake. Yes, I leaked some information. Yes, I've been taking money. But it's not what you think. I'm working undercover." "Don't." Sarah's voice was hard. "Don't insult my intelligence with a cover story. You're not undercover. You're corrupt, and you've endangered every officer in this department with your leaks." "I never endangered you." Marcus's composure cracked. "Even when I leaked operations, I made sure the units you were assigned to weren't at serious risk. I protected you, Sarah, because despite everything, You put a bomb in a shipping container 20 feet from where I was standing. That wasn't me. The explosion wasn't part of my plan. I leaked the port operation, yes, but only to make sure the drugs were moved before you arrived. The explosion was..." He stopped, realizing he'd just confessed. Sarah felt sick. "Who set the bomb, Marcus?" "I don't know. I swear. I don't know. I'm not the only one involved in this. There are other people higher up the chain than me. They have resources, connections, and they don't care about police casualties." "Who are they?" "I can't tell you. They'll kill me if I talk. They'll kill you anyway. You've become a liability." Sarah's finger rested on her weapon's trigger guard, ready but not aggressive. "Your only chance is to cooperate fully. Tell Internal Affairs everything. Names, operations, financial records. Maybe you can cut a deal." Marcus laughed bitterly. "A deal? Sarah, you have no idea how deep this goes. If I talk, I'm dead within 24 hours. These people own judges, prosecutors, cops at every level. There's no protection, no witness security that they can't penetrate. So you're just going to keep betraying your badge? Keep putting officers at risk?" "I'm going to survive." Marcus's expression hardened. "And I'm not going down alone." He moved faster than Sarah expected, his hand diving not for his weapon, but for something in his jacket pocket. Max launched forward with a snarl, covering the distance in 3 powerful bounds. Marcus pulled out what looked like a detonator, a simple device with a red button. "Max, off!" Sarah commanded, fearing Marcus had wired the warehouse. Max pulled up short, training overriding instinct, his body vibrating with restrained aggression. Marcus held the detonator up where Sarah could see it. "There are 50 pounds of C4 planted throughout this warehouse. You shoot me, my finger releases this button, and we all die. You try to leave, I press the button. You call for backup, I press the button." Sarah's mouth went dry. "You're bluffing." "Am I? You know I have access to the evidence locker. You know I have connections to people who can acquire military-grade explosives. Are you willing to bet your life and your dog's life that I'm bluffing?" Max whined, sensing Sarah's fear but unable to understand the threat. He couldn't see the detonator, couldn't smell the specific danger it represented. His training prepared him for physical threats he could bite, enemies he could chase down. Not this. "What do you want, Marcus? I want you to understand that you can't win this. You can't save Daniel Reeves. You can't stop what's happening in this department. All you can do is choose whether to survive or die trying to be a hero. By survive, you mean keep my mouth shut about what I know." "Exactly. Destroy the recording. Forget everything you've learned. Tell Internal Affairs that your investigation into me found nothing concrete. In exchange, I won't press this button, and you get to go home to your dog and your apartment and your simple little life." Sarah's mind raced through options. Could she shoot Marcus before he pressed the button? Too risky. Dying man's reflex might trigger it anyway. Could Max attack and disable Marcus? Same problem. Call for backup. Marcus would hear it and detonate. She was trapped, checkmated by her own determination to confront him alone. But then Max did something unexpected. He turned his head toward the warehouse's far corner, his ears swiveling forward, his body language shifting from aggressive to alert. He'd detected something Sarah couldn't see or hear, and Marcus noticed. "What's your dog?" The warehouse's side door exploded inward. Tactical team members poured through. 6 officers in full gear, weapons trained on Marcus from multiple angles. "Drop the detonator, drop it now!" But leading them wasn't Captain Morrison or any of the expected tactical commanders. It was Daniel Reeves, wearing a tactical vest over his dress uniform, his service weapon drawn, and his expression absolutely focused. "Marcus Delgado, you're under arrest for corruption, conspiracy, and attempted murder of a police officer. Drop the detonator and place your hands behind your head." Marcus's face went white with shock and rage. "You? You were supposed to be in a meeting with the commissioner. The meeting was a trap. Just like this one. We knew you'd try something like this." Daniel moved closer, his weapon never wavering. "We've been investigating you for 3 weeks, Marcus. Ever since I arrived and noticed the same patterns Officer Collins identified. You're sloppy when you're angry, and you've been angry ever since Sarah chose her partner over you. You can't prove anything. I have lawyers, connections. You have a confession. The entire conversation was recorded and witnessed by Internal Affairs." Daniel gestured to the tactical team. "We also have forensic evidence linking you to the stolen samples, bank records showing your offshore accounts, and testimony from 3 criminals willing to testify against you in exchange for reduced sentences." Marcus's hand trembled on the detonator. "If I go down, I'm taking everyone with me. This whole warehouse will be rubble." Max barked sharply, not aggressive but commanding attention. Sarah understood immediately what he was trying to communicate. She'd trained him to detect explosives, and his body language was wrong for genuine threat. He wasn't alerting on any C4. "There's no bomb," Sarah said quietly. "Is there, Marcus? You're bluffing with an empty detonator because you didn't have time to actually wire the warehouse after you texted me." Marcus's expression confirmed it, a flicker of panic before he tried to recover. But it was too late. "Max, take him." Max moved like black lightning, his training and breeding combining in one perfect assault. He hit Marcus in the chest with his full weight, driving him backward and down. The detonator flew from Marcus's hand, skittering across the concrete floor. Before Marcus could recover, Max had his jaws clamped around Marcus's forearm, not crushing, but absolutely immobilizing. The tactical team swarmed in, weapons trained, shouting commands. Within seconds, Marcus was on his stomach with his hands cuffed behind his back, Max standing over him with a growl that promised violence if Marcus moved wrong. "Good boy, Max," Sarah breathed, her entire body shaking with released adrenaline. "Such a good boy." Daniel approached slowly, holstering his weapon. "Are you okay?" Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice yet. She was okay. More than okay. Max had protected her again. Her instincts had been right, and Daniel was standing too close. Close enough that she could see the concern in his dark eyes. Close enough to feel the residual tension radiating from his body. "You came," she said softly. "How did you know?" "Your recording went to Morrison, but he looped me in immediately. We've been outside coordinating the tactical response since you entered." Daniel's hand touched her shoulder gently. "I'm sorry we couldn't move sooner. We had to wait until Marcus gave us enough to arrest him without triggering whatever backup plan he had. The detonator was fake. We know, but we didn't know that for certain until Max confirmed it for you. That dog is remarkable." As if understanding the praise, Max released Marcus's arm and trotted over to Sarah, his tail wagging slightly now that the threat was neutralized. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her face into his fur. "You're the best partner I could ever have," she whispered. "The absolute best." Max licked her face, his tail wagging harder, and for a moment, the warehouse full of tactical officers and a handcuffed traitor faded away. There was just Sarah and Max, partners who'd survived another impossible situation together. Detective Walsh approached with 2 other internal affairs officers. "Officer Collins, we'll need your statement. But first, I owe you an apology. You were right about Reeves, and right about Delgado. Good police work." Sarah stood, still holding Max's collar. "What about the other conspirators? Marcus said he wasn't working alone. He's already started talking. Turns out, when faced with actual prison time, loyalty to criminal partners evaporates pretty quickly." Walsh glanced at Marcus, who was being hauled to his feet by 2 officers. "He's giving us names, accounts, operational details. This is going to be a major bust." As the tactical team escorted Marcus out of the warehouse, he looked back at Sarah with an expression that mixed hatred, regret, and something that might have been genuine sadness. "You could have had everything, Sarah," he called out. "I would have given you everything, but you chose the dog, and now you'll choose him." He jerked his head toward Daniel. "And in 6 months, when he breaks your heart too, you'll realize I was the only one who ever really cared." Sarah felt nothing but pity. "No, Marcus, you never cared about me. You cared about owning me. There's a difference." They dragged him away, still shouting, but Sarah had already turned back to Daniel. "Thank you," she said, "for believing me, for investigating Marcus when you could have just focused on clearing your own name." "I couldn't clear my name without finding the real criminal," Daniel replied. "And I couldn't do that without you. Your instincts, your investigation, you broke this case wide open." "Max broke it. He never trusted Marcus, not from the beginning." Daniel crouched down to Max's level again. This time, Max didn't hesitate. He moved forward and pressed his nose into Daniel's hand, tail wagging, his body language completely relaxed. "He trusts you now," Sarah observed. "He knows I'm not a threat to you or to him." Daniel looked up at her, still crouched beside Max. "Sarah, I know this isn't the right time or place, but I need to say something. That kiss at the gala, I know it was just to avoid Marcus, but for me, it was real," Sarah finished. "It was real for me, too." Daniel stood slowly, stepping closer. "Then, when this is all sorted, when the investigations are complete and the department isn't in chaos, maybe we could try that kiss again. On purpose this time." Sarah found herself smiling, despite everything they'd just been through. "I'd like that, but fair warning, Max comes with me on dates." "I wouldn't have it any other way." Daniel reached out and scratched behind Max's ears. "He's part of the package, the best part, arguably." "Hey," Sarah protested with mock indignation. "Tied for best part," Daniel amended with a grin. Max barked once, as if agreeing, and Sarah laughed, a real laugh that released all the tension and fear she'd been carrying for days. As they walked out of the warehouse into the fading afternoon light, Sarah realized that her instincts had been right all along. Not just about Marcus's guilt or Daniel's innocence, but about something more fundamental. That truth had a way of revealing itself when you trusted your training, your partner, and that voice inside that knew the difference between genuine connection and calculated manipulation. Max trotted beside her, his head high, his tail waving like a banner of victory. He'd done his job perfectly, as always, protected his partner, identified the threat, and helped bring a dangerous criminal to justice. And as Sarah watched Daniel coordinate with the tactical team, giving orders with quiet confidence and treating every officer with respect regardless of rank, she felt something shift in her chest. Not just attraction, though, that was definitely there, but trust. Genuine trust that maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone who understood what it meant to be a partner in every sense of the word. "Collins!" Captain Morrison approached, his expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Hell of a job in there. You and Max both." "Thank you, Captain. What happens now?" "Now, Internal Affairs processes Delgado and starts making arrests based on his testimony. You get 48 hours off. That's an order, not a suggestion. And Max gets a case of his favorite treats delivered to your house, courtesy of the department." Sarah smiled. "He'll appreciate that." Morrison glanced at Daniel, then back to Sarah. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry we suspected Reeves. He's a good cop, and he handled this situation exactly right. We're lucky to have him." "Yes, sir, we are." After Morrison walked away, Daniel returned to Sarah's side. "You know, when I accepted this position, I expected challenges, corruption, departmental politics, maybe some resistance to my leadership style, but I didn't expect," he gestured between them, "this. A kiss at a gala that turned into a major criminal investigation. A connection with someone who makes me want to be better at my job and my life." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "That's quite a line, Chief Reeves." "It's not a line. It's the truth." Daniel's expression grew serious. "I know we have to maintain professional boundaries at work. I know there are rules about fraternization and chain of command. But Sarah, I also know that what I feel when I'm around you and Max, is something I've never felt before, and I don't want to lose it because of bureaucracy." "We'll figure it out," Sarah said firmly. "We're both good at solving complicated problems. This is just another one to work through. Together? Together." Max barked his approval, and Sarah realized that her life had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely better at the same time. As the sun set over the warehouse district, painting the Atlanta skyline in shades of orange and gold, Sarah Collins stood with her two partners, one canine, one human, and felt for the first time in months that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The investigation wasn't over. There would be reports to file, testimony to give, departmental hearings to attend. Marcus's conspirators still needed to be arrested, and the full extent of the corruption would take months to unravel. But right now, in this moment, Sarah allowed herself to simply breathe and acknowledge a truth that Max had known from the beginning. Sometimes the most important skill an officer can have isn't the ability to make arrests or analyze evidence. Sometimes it's the ability to trust your instincts about who deserves your loyalty and who doesn't. And Sarah's instincts, backed by Max's infallible judgment, told her that Daniel Reeves was one of the good ones. The real question now was, where would they go from here? But that was a puzzle for another day. Tonight, Sarah would go home with Max, feed him the expensive treats he deserved, and maybe, just maybe, allow herself to believe that something good could come from the chaos. After all, stranger things had happened, like kissing a suspect at a police gala and discovering he was exactly the partner she'd been looking for all along. 3 weeks after Marcus Delgado's arrest, Sarah found herself standing in front of the Atlanta Police Department's disciplinary review board. The wood-paneled conference room on the 5th floor had witnessed countless officers defend their actions, explain their decisions, and sometimes watch their careers end. Today, Sarah was here to answer for conducting an unauthorized investigation into a fellow officer and potentially compromising a major internal affairs operation by confronting Marcus alone. Max sat beside her chair, his tactical vest replaced with his formal service vest, the one with his commendation medals attached. He'd been granted special permission to attend as Sarah's official canine partner, and his presence was the only thing keeping her calm. The review board consisted of 5 members. Deputy Chief Anderson, a stern woman in her 50s who'd built her reputation on holding officers accountable, Commander Phillips from Internal Affairs, Captain Morrison, who looked uncomfortable being part of the process, and 2 civilian oversight representatives appointed by the mayor's office. And presiding over them all was Chief Daniel Reeves. Sarah had argued that Daniel should recuse himself given their personal connection, but he'd refused, stating that as Chief of Police, his presence was mandatory for all major disciplinary reviews. The tension in his jaw suggested he wasn't any happier about it than Sarah was. "Officer Collins," Deputy Chief Anderson began, adjusting her reading glasses as she reviewed the file before her. "You're here today because your actions during the investigation into Detective Marcus Delgado, while ultimately successful, violated several departmental protocols. Do you understand the charges?" "Yes, ma'am. Specifically, conducting an unauthorized investigation into a fellow officer, meeting with a potentially dangerous suspect without backup, and recording conversations without proper legal authorization." "How do you respond to these charges?" Sarah had spent the past 3 weeks preparing for this moment with the union-appointed lawyer who sat beside her, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in defending officers accused of procedural violations. But now, standing before the board with Max's solid presence beside her and Daniel's dark eyes watching from the head of the table, Sarah decided to speak from the heart rather than from her lawyer's carefully prepared script. "I acknowledge that I violated protocol," Sarah said clearly. "Captain Morrison provided me with investigative access to Detective Delgado's files, but I pursued leads beyond the scope of that authorization. I met Marcus at the warehouse knowing it was potentially dangerous, and I recorded our conversation without obtaining a warrant." Anderson nodded, making notes. "So, you admit to all charges?" "I admit to the actions, but I'd like the board to understand the context." Sarah took a breath. "For 3 months, I was assigned to investigate Chief Reeves based on evidence that appeared conclusive. During that investigation, I noticed patterns that suggested someone else might be responsible for the corruption we were investigating. When I brought these concerns to my superiors, I was given 48 hours to produce concrete evidence, or the department would move forward with charges against Chief Reeves, regardless of doubts. "You felt pressured to act quickly," Commander Phillips observed. "I felt obligated to pursue the truth, sir. Chief Reeves was about to have his career destroyed based on fabricated evidence. Officers were being put at risk by leaked operations. The department's integrity was being compromised by a criminal conspiracy. I had 2 days to prevent a massive injustice, and I used the tools and authority available to me. By violating the very protocols designed to prevent abuse of that authority," Anderson countered. "Yes, ma'am. And if I had it to do over again, I would make the same choice, because protecting the department and my fellow officers is more important than my career." The room fell silent. Patricia Chen looked like she wanted to strangle Sarah for going off script, but there was also grudging respect in her expression. Daniel leaned forward. "Officer Collins, did you at any time act out of personal motivation? Did your relationship with Detective Delgado or your—" He paused almost imperceptibly. "Interactions with me influence your investigative decisions." Sarah met his gaze directly. "My personal history with Marcus made me initially resistant to suspecting him. I had to overcome my own bias to see the evidence clearly. As for you, Chief, my interaction with you at the gala created a conflict that I should have reported immediately. I didn't, and that was a mistake." "Why didn't you report it?" Anderson asked sharply. Because I was embarrassed, and because I was afraid it would compromise the investigation into you. Sarah looked at Daniel. I was afraid that if I reported the kiss, internal affairs would remove me from the case, and someone less thorough would miss the evidence pointing to Marcus. Daniel's expression remained professionally neutral, but Sarah saw something flicker in his eyes, understanding, perhaps, or appreciation for her honesty. Let me be clear, Daniel said formally. That interaction at the gala was entirely my responsibility. Officer Collins was attempting to avoid an uncomfortable situation with her former partner, and I chose to participate in that deception. Any disciplinary consequences should fall on me, not her. That's not how it works, Chief, Anderson said dryly. You can't take responsibility for another officer's choices, even when those choices prevented a corrupt detective from destroying evidence and potentially killing his fellow officers. Daniel's voice carried an edge of steel. Even when those choices exposed a criminal conspiracy that reached into multiple departments and resulted in 7 arrests, including 2 lieutenants and a commander. The ends don't justify the means. Philip said, if we allow officers to violate protocol whenever they believe they're serving a greater good, we undermine the entire system. I agree, Sarah interjected. Commander Phillips is right. I violated protocol, and there should be consequences. I'm prepared to accept suspension, demotion, or whatever punishment the board deems appropriate. Max whined softly, pressing against her leg. He didn't understand the legal proceedings, but he understood Sarah's distress. She reached down to touch his head, drawing strength from his presence. One of the civilian representatives, a woman named Dr. Martinez, who worked in criminal justice reform, spoke up for the first time. I have a question for Officer Collins. During your investigation, you relied heavily on your K-9 partner's instincts. Can you explain how Max's behavior influenced your conclusions? Sarah nodded. Max has been trained to detect threats, explosives, and narcotics. But beyond his formal training, he's also incredibly perceptive about people. When he first encountered Chief Reeves, he was cautious, but not hostile. When he encountered Marcus at the warehouse, he was immediately aggressive, warning me of danger before Marcus revealed his true intentions. Max's instincts helped me distinguish between a man being falsely accused and a man who was genuinely dangerous. So you trusted your dog's judgment over the evidence compiled by internal affairs? Doctor. Martinez sounded genuinely curious rather than critical. I trusted my dog's judgment alongside the evidence I'd gathered independently. Max confirmed what my investigation was revealing, that Marcus, not Chief Reeves, was the threat to this department. Dr. Martinez made a note, then looked at Daniel. Chief Reeves, what's your assessment of Officer Collins's actions? Daniel was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing his words carefully. Officer Collins demonstrated exceptional investigative instincts, courage under pressure, and dedication to protecting this department. She also violated protocols that exist for good reason. As Chief of Police, I can't endorse rule-breaking even when it produces positive results. But as someone whose career was nearly destroyed by false accusations, I'm grateful that at least one officer was willing to risk her career to uncover the truth. That doesn't answer my question, Chief. Doctor. Martinez pressed. What should we do with Officer Collins? Daniel looked directly at Sarah. I think she should be reprimanded for procedural violations, required to complete additional training on investigative protocols, and assigned to work with internal affairs to develop better procedures for handling corruption investigations. I also think she should be commended for exposing a criminal conspiracy and saving lives. Both things can be true simultaneously. Anderson consulted with the other board members in whispered conversation. Sarah stood quietly. Max pressed against her leg and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. She'd spoken the truth, violated protocol for good reasons, and would accept the consequences. After 5 minutes of deliberation, Anderson looked up. Officer Collins, This board finds that you violated departmental protocol in the conduct of your investigation. You are hereby issued a formal reprimand that will remain in your personnel file. You are also required to complete 40 hours of additional training on investigative procedures and legal standards for evidence gathering. Sarah exhaled slowly. A reprimand and training. She could live with that, but Anderson wasn't finished. However, this board also recognizes that your actions exposed significant corruption, prevented the wrongful prosecution of Chief Reeves, and led to the arrest of multiple criminals within the department. Therefore, you are also awarded a commendation for exceptional investigative work and a citation for bravery in confronting Detective Delgado despite personal risk. Sarah blinked in surprise. "Mom, you screwed up the procedure, Collins," Anderson said with the faintest hint of a smile. "But you got the job done. That's what good police work looks like. Messy, complicated, and ultimately effective. Don't make a habit of it, but don't second-guess your instincts either." Dismissed. As Sarah left the conference room with Max and Patricia Chen, she felt like she'd just survived a gunfight. Her hands shook slightly with released adrenaline. "That went better than expected," Patricia observed. "You're lucky Reeves spoke up for you." "He was fair," Sarah corrected. "He acknowledged the violations, but also the results. He's also clearly interested in you personally, which could become a problem if you two aren't careful about maintaining professional boundaries." Patricia gave her a knowing look. "I'm saying this as your lawyer and as someone who's been there. Be careful. Relationships within the chain of command rarely end well." Sarah nodded, but her mind was already elsewhere. She needed to find Daniel and thank him properly for his support during the hearing. She also needed to figure out what their relationship actually was, now that the investigation was over and Marcus was awaiting trial. She found Daniel in his office an hour later, reviewing reports with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up. He looked up when she knocked, and something in his expression softened. "Come in, Officer Collins." "Chief." Sarah entered with Max, who immediately trotted over to Daniel's desk. Daniel had apparently been keeping treats in his drawer because Max sat expectantly until Daniel produced a biscuit. "Bribing my partner, Chief. Building rapport with a valued member of the team," Daniel corrected with a slight smile. He stood, moving around his desk. "How are you feeling about the board's decision?" "Grateful. Fair. A little surprised you defended me so strongly given that we're supposed to be maintaining professional distance." "I defended you because you deserved it. Your actions saved my career and exposed real corruption. That has nothing to do with what happened at the gala." Daniel paused. "Though we should probably talk about that." Sarah's heart rate picked up. "Talk about what, specifically?" "About the fact that I'm your commanding officer, which means any personal relationship between us would violate fraternization policies. About the fact that despite those policies, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that kiss. And about the fact that Max is currently sitting between us like a chaperone, making sure nothing inappropriate happens in my office." Sarah looked down to find that Max had indeed positioned himself directly between them, looking back and forth, as if monitoring the conversation. "He's protective," Sarah said. "He's smart. He knows this situation is complicated." Daniel sat on the edge of his desk, maintaining a respectful distance. "Sarah, I need to be honest with you. When I took this job, I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was looking to rebuild my career and prove I wasn't the corrupt cop everyone suspected. But then you kissed me to avoid Marcus. I know. But Sarah, that kiss was the first genuine moment I'd experienced in months. Everything else was political, calculated, designed to protect myself from accusations. But that kiss, that was real and terrifying. Because I knew even then that getting involved with you would be complicated and potentially career-ending for both of us. So what are you saying?" Daniel met her gaze directly. "I'm saying that I want to pursue this, whatever this is, but only if you want it to, and only if we can do it in a way that doesn't compromise either of our careers or the department's integrity." Sarah considered her options. She could play it safe, maintain strict professional boundaries, and protect herself from potential heartbreak. She'd done that after Marcus, building walls and trusting only Max. Or she could take a risk on someone who'd proven himself trustworthy, who'd defended her when he didn't have to, and who apparently kept dog treats in his desk drawer specifically for her partner. "What did you have in mind?" Sarah asked. "First, I disclose our relationship to the Commissioner and request approval for you to report to someone other than me directly. Captain Morrison would be the logical choice. That eliminates the chain of command issue." "That works." "Second, we move slowly. No public displays, no letting personal feelings affect professional decisions. We keep work and personal life completely separate until we're sure this is something worth pursuing long term." Also works. "Third, and most important," Daniel looked at Max, "your partner has veto power. If Max decides he doesn't trust me or doesn't like how I treat you, we stop. No questions, no arguments. Because, frankly, Max's judgment has been better than most humans throughout this entire situation." Sarah felt something warm bloom in her chest. "You're willing to let my dog determine the fate of our relationship?" "I'm willing to trust the instincts of a highly trained K9 officer who's kept you alive for 6 years, and who clearly loves you more than anything in the world." Daniel smiled. "Besides, Max already likes me. He's been taking treats from me for 2 weeks. You've been bribing my partner for 2 weeks. Building rapport, there's a difference." Sarah laughed, and it felt good, natural and unforced. She moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in Daniel's dark eyes, close enough to smell his cologne mixed with coffee and determination. "So, if we're going to do this," she said quietly, "we should probably establish some ground rules beyond the professional ones, such as, I come as a package deal. Me and Max, always. If you can't handle that my dog is my priority, this won't work. Already established. What else? I'm not good at vulnerability. I'm used to handling things on my own, and I don't like asking for help. So you need to be patient with me when I try to shut you out. I can do that. Anything else?" Sarah hesitated, then spoke the truth that scared her most. "Marcus hurt me, not just by ending our relationship publicly, but by making me doubt myself. He made me feel like loving my job, and my partner was a character flaw instead of a strength. I need to know that you understand why I do this job, why Max matters so much, and why I can't just be someone's girlfriend. I need to be a cop first." Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. "Sarah, I fell for you because you're a cop, because you're dedicated and brave and brilliant at what you do. Because you have a partner who'd die for you, and you do the same for him. I don't want to change any of that. I want to be part of it, if you'll let me." Max, apparently satisfied with this declaration, lay down with a contented sigh. "I think that's approval," Sarah observed. "I think you're right." Daniel's thumb traced circles on her palm. "So what do you say, Officer Collins? Want to risk this complicated, potentially disastrous, definitely against policy relationship with your commanding officer?" Sarah pretended to consider it, though her answer had been decided the moment Daniel mentioned Max having veto power. "On one condition." "Name it." "Our first official date involves taking Max somewhere fun. He deserves it after everything he's been through." Daniel grinned. "I know a great hiking trail outside the city. Beautiful views, dog-friendly and private enough that we won't run into half the department." "Perfect. When?" "This weekend, Saturday morning. It's a date." They stood there for a moment longer, hands linked, Max sleeping peacefully between them, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt since before Marcus. Hope. Real, uncomplicated hope that maybe this time she'd found someone who understood that loving a K9 officer meant accepting that her partner had 4 legs and a tail. The next 3 months passed in a blur of routine and revelation. Marcus's trial proceeded with devastating efficiency. His testimony about the criminal conspiracy led to 14 additional arrests, including 2 judges and a police commander who'd been facilitating drug trafficking for years. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of early parole. Sarah threw herself into her work with renewed energy. The commendation from the disciplinary board had raised her profile within the department, and she was now being consulted on major investigations. She and Max continued their perfect partnership, racking up successful operations and cementing their reputation as one of the best K9 teams in the Southeast. And on her off-duty hours, she spent time with Daniel. True to his word, Daniel had disclosed their relationship to Commissioner Hayes and arranged for Sarah to report directly to Captain Morrison rather than through him. The professional boundaries were scrupulously maintained. At work, they were chief and officer, nothing more. But on weekends, they were Daniel and Sarah, and Max, of course, who'd become so comfortable with Daniel that he now greeted him with the same enthusiasm he reserved for his favorite toys. Their first official date, the hiking trip, had been perfect. Max had bounded ahead on the trail, chasing squirrels and investigating every interesting smell, while Sarah and Daniel talked about everything and nothing. No case files, no departmental politics, just 2 people getting to know each other without the pressure of investigations and accusations. Daniel had kissed her again that day, properly this time, at a scenic overlook with Max exploring nearby. It was everything the gala kiss had promised and more. Genuine, tender, and full of possibilities. Now, 3 months later, Sarah stood in Daniel's kitchen on a Saturday morning, watching him attempt to make pancakes while Max supervised hopefully from his position by the stove. "You're going to burn those," Sarah observed, sipping her coffee. "I have it under control." The smoke alarm begs to differ. Daniel looked up to find smoke curling from the pan. He cursed under his breath and flipped the pancakes, revealing they were indeed quite dark. "Okay, so I'm not great at cooking. You're the chief of police. You have other valuable skills. Such as, you give excellent belly rubs." Sarah gestured to Max, who was now on his back with his legs in the air, having received said belly rub earlier. Max's approval is hard to earn. Max is discerning. I take his approval as a high compliment. Daniel abandoned the pancakes and moved to where Sarah sat at the kitchen island. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you happy with this?" He gestured between them. "With us." Sarah considered the question seriously. Was she happy? Marcus had made her feel like something was wrong with her for prioritizing her job and her K9 partner. He'd made happiness feel conditional, dependent on her changing fundamental parts of herself. But Daniel had never asked her to change. He'd simply accepted her as she was, a dedicated cop with a dog she loved more than most people, someone who valued loyalty over romance and partnership over passion. And somehow that acceptance had created space for both partnership and passion to coexist. "Yeah," Sarah said softly. "I'm happy, happier than I've been in years." Daniel smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Good. Because I have something to ask you, and I need you to be honest with me." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Okay, the commissioner is creating a new position, Director of K9 Operations. It would oversee all K9 units in the city, coordinate with other agencies, and develop training protocols. It's a significant promotion, with increased responsibility and visibility." "That sounds amazing. Who are you considering for it?" "You." Sarah nearly dropped her coffee. "Me? But I've only been on the force for 6 years. You're the best K9 officer in the department. You've successfully completed more operations than officers with twice your experience. You exposed a major corruption ring, and you have the respect of both your peers and your superiors." Daniel paused. "The only complication is that accepting this position would make you roughly equivalent in rank to a captain, which means you'd no longer be in my direct chain of command, even indirectly." "No, which means we wouldn't have to worry about fraternization policies," Sarah said slowly, understanding dawning. "Exactly. But Sarah, I need you to decide based on what's best for your career, not based on our relationship. If you don't want the position, or if you think it's too much too soon, say so. I'll support whatever you choose." Sarah looked at Max, who'd rolled over and was now watching her with those intelligent dark eyes that had guided her through 6 years of partnership. "What do you think, buddy?" she asked. "Should I take the promotion?" Max's tail thumped once against the floor, his signal for yes. Sarah laughed. "Well, that's settled then. If Max approves, who am I to argue?" Daniel pulled her into his arms, and Sarah let herself lean into the embrace. 3 months ago, she'd been investigating this man for corruption. 6 months ago, she'd kissed him to avoid her ex-boyfriend. And now she was standing in his kitchen, accepting a promotion that would change her career, with her K9 partner's blessing. "I love you," Daniel said quietly, the words barely above a whisper. "I know it's soon, and I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I need you to know I love you, and I love Max, and I love the life we're building together." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. She'd been hurt before, betrayed by someone she'd trusted. But standing here with Daniel's arms around her and Max's solid presence nearby, she realized that fear couldn't protect her from future pain. It could only prevent her from experiencing future joy. "I love you too," she said. "Both of us do." Max barked his agreement, and Sarah felt the last of her walls finally crumble. The next morning, Sarah attended her first day as director of K9 operations. The position came with a larger office, a bigger budget, and responsibility for coordinating all K9 teams across Atlanta. It was challenging, demanding, and exactly what she'd been working toward her entire career. But the best part came at the end of her first day, when she was reviewing deployment schedules and heard a familiar bark outside her office. Max bounded in, followed by Jake Chen and Rex. "Congratulations, Director," Jake said with a grin. "Thought Max might want to check out your new digs." Sarah laughed as Max thoroughly inspected every corner of the office before returning to sit at her feet with a satisfied expression. "What do you think, Max?" she asked. "Good enough for us?" Max's tail wagged, and Sarah knew they'd made the right choice. 3 months later, the Atlanta Police Department held another gala, this one celebrating the successful prosecution of the corruption case and honoring the officers who'd brought it to light. Sarah attended in a navy dress that matched Max's formal service vest, and she didn't hide when she saw Daniel across the room. Instead, she walked directly to him, Max at her side, and didn't hesitate when Daniel smiled and pulled her close. "Dance with me?" he asked. "In front of the entire department. In front of everyone. No more hiding, no more complications, just us." Sarah let Daniel lead her onto the dance floor, aware of the eyes watching them, the whispers that would follow. But she didn't care. She'd spent too long worrying about what others thought, about protecting herself from potential judgment. As they swayed to the music, Max lying contentedly by the edge of the dance floor, Sarah realized that the kiss that had started everything, that impulsive, desperate moment when she'd grabbed a stranger to avoid her ex, had led her exactly where she needed to be, with a partner who understood that her job wasn't just what she did, it was who she was. With a K9 partner who'd proven time and again that loyalty was more valuable than anything else. And with the knowledge that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most important revelations. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel murmured. "About how I kissed a suspect at a police gala to avoid my ex and ended up finding everything I didn't know I was looking for." Daniel laughed quietly. "Best mistake you ever made. Best instinct I ever followed." Sarah looked up at him. "That, and trusting Max's judgment about people. Max has excellent judgment." "He does. That's why I'm here with you instead of running away. I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." The song ended, but they remained on the dance floor for another and another, building a future one dance at a time. And through it all, Max watched over them both, guardian, partner, and witness to a love story that had begun with a kiss and continued with trust, courage, and the unshakable bond between an officer and her K9 partner. Because in the end, Sarah Collins had learned the most important lesson of her career, that the best partnerships, whether with a dog or a person, are built on trust, loyalty, and the willingness to risk everything for the truth. And sometimes, just sometimes, those partnerships lead to exactly the kind of happy ending that nobody sees coming, especially when it starts with kissing a suspect at a police gala.